always and forever. All right, there we go. Now we're just waiting to pop on with IG. There we go. Perfecto. Okay. So I think we are good. Let me get my slides up. Here we go. All right. So we're continuing on. Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for attending. So we are going to be kind of extending our conversation around discipline and looking at it from a lens of discipline and accountability, but also to disappointment. And we're going to look at the different archetypes. Now, I have to go grab my earbuds. I just realized that I need those. Hold on 1 second. I will be right back. Give me 2 seconds. I'm back in the Caribbean. All right, perfect. So I think my mic is good now. All right, perfect. And you guys can hear me well. All right, cool. Hello. Awesome. Okay, cool. So we're going to continue our conversation around discipline and disappointment and accountability, because I think we get really my computer keeps picking up this. Let me turn this off. There we go. All right, that should get it. All right, perfect. That should keep it. That should pretty good now. All right, so mic is on. Mic is on. All right, cool. So we're going to continue that conversation around discipline, really coming from that place of punishment where most people learn discipline from. And so we talked a little bit about this. I can't remember which day we chatted about it, but there was a day that we chatted about it. Okay, so and I know you can barely see the slides on TikTok, on YouTube, and some of the other channels you can. So remember discipline and our relationship with discipline. Most people equate discipline with punishment because most people, that's what they originally were taught, was discipline, was I'm wrong, I'm bad, I need to be punished. And so they carry that with them when they're going to, let's say, learn something new or incorporate a new lifestyle or change something in their lives. And so we really want to unpack discipline and our relationship around discipline, really to hold ourselves accountable, and allow ourselves to break through this cultural as well as familiar societal conditioning. We've all been kind of conditioned about what discipline is, and we all have an idea of what discipline is. And so today's goal really is to transform this idea of and this practice of discipline into a tool of self-respect and into a tool of alignment for you. So rather than looking at discipline as a bad thing or a wrong thing or a punishment thing, really transforming it and looking at it as this is my devotion to myself, this is my connection to myself. But we're also going to unpack what gets in the way of that, because it's not just like, oh, I'm going to make this decision and bam, this is what's going to happen. Like, no, there's a lot to do with it. And so again, what have we been taught about our discipline? So we've been taught that it's typically rooted in shame or some sort of external pressure. Hey, Black Cabinet, some sort of shame or external pressure. I'm doing this. I'm having to discipline because of, if I don't, then this will happen or that will happen, and that has an impact on our nervous system. Hey, Eweezy, on our nervous system, but also our self-worth and our identity. If we are constantly taught that by beating myself down, then that means I can continue forward. And we try to use that mindset to help us propel ourselves forward in whatever we're trying to accomplish. It is going to weigh heavily on our self-worth, on our self-esteem, and ultimately it's not necessarily going to yield the result that we're looking for. Oftentimes it's rooted in obedience, fear, perfectionism. I have to do it this way for whatever reason, so I don't disappoint somebody, or I don't make somebody angry, or I want to fit in, or any of these ideas that we have really sculpted around discipline, again, rooted in obedience, fear, punishment, perfectionism, all of these ideas. And so they don't really serve us as adults when we're trying to clear ourselves from our unhealthy patterns in relationship to discipline. So how do you know if you have an unhealthy pattern in relationship to discipline? Let's look at it. So that all or nothing thinking. If I don't do it this way, right, which is usually the perfect way, if I don't achieve it 100%, then it's no longer valid. It's no longer good. Or we get into these cycles of burnout and self-punishment. So we push and push and push and push and push. We neglect ourselves. We don't listen to our bodies. We don't listen to our minds. We don't listen to how we're truly feeling. And then when we crash and burn because we're exhausted from pushing ourselves, then we come back and we beat ourselves up and judge ourselves and, all of these things. And so we're shaming ourselves of these perceived failures. And so it's these cycles of failures that continue to, transmute year after year after year. We're like, oh, I'm trying to eat healthy, or I'm trying to lose weight, or I'm trying to heal my body, or I'm trying to learn something new, or whatever it is that, because we need discipline pretty much with anything that we want to put our minds to, want to put ourselves to. And so we can experience that intense shame of never meeting those expectations if we have framed discipline around perfectionism or burnout. There's also other strategies that people have in relationship to discipline. So some of those would be avoidance, right? So some people just avoid discipline altogether. Oh, I'm just not a disciplined person. I'm not really interested in that. And so they don't really gain any traction and momentum to what they're trying to do because it does require consistent action. And so then other times people will procrastinate. They'll just avoid, doing those things altogether. Well, I'll get through to it on Monday, or I'll get to it on Tuesday, or it'll work out. Or many of us, like myself, rebel against it. So if someone gives me a structure and says, you must do this, then I'm going to be like, nope, I'm not doing that. So, but then that rebellion impacts me because ultimately the rebellion, is more of a trauma response and more of me trying to get out of doing something, not necessarily staying focused into our disciplined world. And so we can be truly disconnected from our purpose and disconnected from our values. And that's really when this unhealthy relationship with discipline really shows itself, is when we tell ourselves we have an intention, that we are going to complete something, accomplish something, etc. And then our execution strategy. So we break it down. We have an intention, then we have a structure to fulfill upon that. And then we have an execution strategy. So when our execution starts showing up, that's a lot where resistance come up. So we may have an intention to do something. We may also have a structure to do it. Hey, Dr. Quinn, and then we try to execute on that. And then as we execute on that, that's when all of these different behaviors and ideas and perceptions show up that really don't serve us. And so we are going to really redefine what discipline truly is. So discipline, again, is a devotion and not a deprivation. So it's a devotion to yourself and really to your intention. So whatever your intention is, whether it's to complete a class or, eat healthy or get off your medications or whatever that intention may be, right? That is a devotion that you have to it. However, many of us, again, have this unhealthy relationship with it. We assume that this is deprivation. We assume that, this is a punishment. We assume, even if we are signing up for it, even if we're choosing to do this, we still view it in a certain way. So it's time to really return back to our purpose. It's time for us to redefine what our purpose is and begin to connect our actions to really a deeper meaning, because that's what's going to get us there, right? Simon Sinek wrote a book a while ago in the business world called Start With Why. And so a lot of times, yes, absolutely. Absolutely, it's devotion and not deprivation. Thanks for putting that in the chat, because we have to have a why, and that why cannot be external, right? So sometimes people will come like into my practice and will be like, oh, I want to get healthy for my grandchildren or my children or my significant other or someone else. And that's what we call extrinsic motivation. And extrinsic motivation is only going to get us so far. We have to have internally something that drives us beyond, right, someone else's approval of us, external. Because if we position them, if we hand our power over to them and they're the ones that is kind of the puppet strings of what we're doing, again, when things get difficult, that may not be enough for us to pull ourselves forward. So we want to start moving more into aligned actions. We want to exactly. We want to move towards more of our sacred routines, more of our compassionate consistency, where we're not necessarily this all or nothing or these shame cycles of perfectionism or burnout cycles or anything like that. We realize that this is a journey and that this is not a destination. This is going to be a lifetime experience. And I can speak especially for when it comes to your health, because your health is definitely not something that it's like, poof, it happens. And so what tends to happen when people choose a new health routine is that they have lots of expectations, right? Oh, I'm going to get off of this in 6 months. I'm going to heal this diagnosis in a year. I'm going to, do all these things. And they don't necessarily have a realistic expectation of what that looks like. And so they come in already with a very skewed perception of the way things are. And because of that, they set themselves up for disappointment. They set themselves up for the overburden, the chronic, perfectionism, or even the punishment cycles. And so when we let go of expectation, and we free ourselves from expectation, we're no longer trapped in some sort of mode that things have to go in, or some sort of, scripting that things have to happen in. Instead, we allow for more freedom and more resilience. Hey, lovely, when we're doing that. So let's look at what the pillars are of our self-discipline, right? When we're looking at it from a holistic perspective and we're looking at it from a holistic lifestyle perspective. Number one, it's about self-awareness. Self-awareness, I cannot stress this enough, the importance of self-awareness. Self-awareness helps you to understand your patterns, helps you to understand your triggers, helps you to understand your authentic needs. Now, sometimes people are unacquainted with their authentic needs simply because they've conditioned themselves to, perpetually people please or, support others or, gain other people's approval, etc. So sometimes people have to pull themselves back and start to set boundaries and start to say yes or no, or I'm going to do or I'm not going to do. And so that may be the work there just to start is, building that authentic need and those authentic, it's difficult sometimes, I think, for people to truly allow themselves to have what they want. because most of the time it's always been mired with what this person wants or what that person wants, or what that person needs or what this person needs. And so many of us have been conditioned to constantly be giving to everyone else. And so when we start to pull ourselves back, certain patterns show up. I know in my family system, I tended to be the scapegoat. So whenever I would communicate or express my needs, then all of a sudden, oh, Erica, why are you, trying to make it about you? Or, oh, Erica, there was a lot of dismissal. There was a lot of, I was even told in certain instances that you just want everyone to cater to you. And, again, like these are all manipulative tactics to get me to stay in these unhealthy patterns of self-abandonment, rescuing, fixing, compromising, and really just making other people feel comfortable. Even if that is not part of your family system, right? It can also show up in your working system. Oh, yeah. Well, my life has definitely been one that has taught me the most about all the things holistic, right? And so, in order to really teach from these places authentically, you have to do the work, which means you have to go through and self examine. And so, sometimes, again, in family systems, that's like your first lessons of relationship. Those original family systems are how you're going to then create relationships with other people. And so if those relationships are not healthy, either you have narcissistic parents like I did, or you have yeah, exactly, because we want to transform the darkness into light. Or you have had triangulation with siblings because of narcissistic parental abuse, or you've had, emotional deprivation, as children. All of that has to be rewired, reworked, reorganized, relooked at. And we kind of skip over that and we move more into survival mode, trying to achieve and trying to execute. But what I've learned is that the tools and the strategies that we've had in order to get us to a certain place, eventually they'll stop working, and eventually we have to transform whatever's blocking us in order to move to the next level, right? So I wanted to be married, right? I've always wanted to be married. In order for me to have a healthy relationship, that means that I have to work on the relationship with myself, because if I don't have a strong and healthy relationship with self, I can't have a healthy relationship with another person. And so we see how all of these different things affect every different area of your life. So even if you're focusing on maybe a physical health issue, right, it's going to impact your relationships. It's going to impact, your financial. It's going to impact your business. It's going to impact so many different areas of your life that you may or may not be aware of, simply because this is kind of how things are or how things will be. And so because of that, you overcompensated different areas. Now, when you start to switch up the script on people, meaning that, it's not going to be the same that you always were. Let's say you've been very agreeable, you've been very, mellow and relaxed, and just kind of allowed people to walk all over you, like I did for many, many years, just trying to like keep things mellow. Really, my nervous system needing to keep the peace, because coming from so much violence and coming from so much disease and not peace, right? My nervous system really craving that. So what was easier to do than to be very neutral and just kind of allow people to be themselves, right? Well, there's a balance to that. If you continue to just allow people to be themselves, people assume you don't have a voice. People assume that you don't have desires and needs. So then when you start speaking up to these desires and needs, what happens? A lot of reaction. So this is a really good place to start, is terms of taking a piece of paper and writing down, what do I really want? Like if there was nobody else around, if there was nobody else vying for my attention, what would I truly want? Right? And as I begin to really process and understand and really define, and I will also say too that knowing what you want is not something that is like a one time and boom. You may think that you want one thing and then you get it and you're like, okay, maybe that wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be, right? Maybe that was better off in my mind than what it is in real life. So let me try again. And that trying again and not shutting down and getting disappointed is really what we're going to be talking about today as we're looking at accountability, as we're looking at disappointment, as we're looking at discipline. In all of this, we want to have self-compassion. So we want to treat ourselves with kindness, with love, with support. We also want to manage our feelings, right, as they come up, because we're going to be triggered ultimately. We're going to trigger others. We're going to be triggered ourselves. But these triggers are nothing more than tools for us to learn, not necessarily for us to be controlled by them. Now, if you need emotional regulation, that may show up that, okay, I didn't learn emotional regulation. For me, I learned two strategies of emotional regulation. I learned to be totally shut down and not say anything, but be passive aggressive, or to be totally explosive, highly reactive, and always, wanting other people to caretake my emotions, right? Those were my models of emotional regulation. And so me being a very sensitive soul, me having to recognize what my emotions are, being able to name those emotions, being able to process them through in a healthy way, right? And being able to make new decisions and new actions because of what I learned about myself and my emotional health. And so when I'm learning these new things, now I'm going to create internal boundaries for myself, what I will and won't do. So like for me, because I grew up in such a violent upbringing, for me, and both my parents were Marines. For me, I chose, I will never hold a gun, trust a pew pew, any of those things, because it's just not in alignment with myself. These were things that internal boundaries that I made up with myself. Now, externally, I've dated guys that have concealed carries and, woo, Second Amendment, like do your thing, but for me, that's an internal boundary that I have. But for other people, as long as you are healthy, safe with it, etc., that's your prerogative. But these are limitations that I've had to learn within myself, right? And so now we look at that kind of vision-based living. And so again, once you sit down and you decide what it is that you really want, and you're willing to process through the emotions that come up around that, because there are going to be lots of emotions that come up with that. There could be unworthiness, there could be loss of control, there could be frustration, disappointment, all sorts of emotions between looking at what is and where you are, and then ultimately looking at what it is that you want to create. And a lot of times there's some distance between what is and what it is that you want to create. But this all involves consciousness. And so most people are operating their lives, unfortunately, unconscious. They are completely devoid of any sort of awareness to what they're doing themselves, and then what they're doing to other people and how that can impact other people. And so we want to be responsible, right? Or be cause in the matter of our own lives by saying, okay, I have one life, regardless of, my parents, my grandparents, my living conditions, my world, regardless of that, I have a soul and I have a life and I have a purpose and a mission and all of that. That takes a little bit of due diligence on your part, because you have to accept what is, and let go of what it is you thought it was going to be. And I know for me and my deconstruction, it was me really coming to that realization that I'm alone in the world. And while some may say, oh my gosh, that's so horrible, right? For me, it was very liberating, because me deciding that, no, I'm not going to continue to subject myself and put myself in positions that are going to be harmful to me. I'm no longer going to be willing to be in rooms that I'm not welcome in. I'm no longer going to continue to share and spread my gifts to people who don't, appreciate them, value them, etc. So these were all very hard lessons, I must say, that I had to learn within myself. And so wherever you are in your journey and your path is perfect. It's not about judging it, fixing it, shaming it, changing it, or making anything different, but it's more or less of really being with it and acknowledging it and knowing that you want to do something different and creating a new vision. Okay, so now let's look at accountability. So accountability, we often see accountability. Thanks for the shares, Just Tracy. We often look at accountability as an external thing. I'm going to have this person hold me accountable or that person to hold me accountable, rather than I'm going to hold myself accountable to my vision. So you really have to define what your vision is, what it is that you want to create first and foremost. Because if you don't actually define what it is you want, you can't hold yourself accountable to it. I don't care, how amazing you are. And so you first want to define what it is that you want, what it is that your purpose is, because your meaningful actions are going to either be in alignment with that vision or they're going to be in misalignment with that vision. So if I choose to eat healthy, as an example, my vision is of me, eating all these fruits, vegetables, and, proteins, and, I'm just nourishing myself and my body feels healed and whole and all of these things, right? But then my daily actions are ordering out or eating bad food or all of those things, then my vision, right, and my execution is not in alignment with my purpose, and then therefore I'm not having meaningful actions and I'm not holding myself accountable. Hey, Crowned. And so if I hold myself accountable, then I'm holding myself really defined with clarity to my purpose, and my execution strategy. So with that being said, in order to execute on anything, we have to create a structure to fulfill upon that. I taught a class totally on how to create structures for fulfillment in your life. So as an example, if I'm going to choose to eat healthy, my structures for fulfillment are going to be, I need to make time for meal prep. I need to make time for grocery shopping. I need to research the foods that I need to eat. I need to, have recipes for that. I need to prep my food. I need to eat my food. There are steps involved, and I have a life outside of prepping food. And so I have to create a structure and a routine and a system that supports me in my progress. Because otherwise, if I don't have a system to support me, then I'm going to lose my accountability, and then I'm going to either judge myself or beat myself up or any of the things that we do, or try to power through till, burnout and that kind of thing. So we want to create a structure, which is nothing more than a routine and a system that's going to work easily and effortlessly for us, one that's going to support us even when it's difficult. So for me, a structure for eating healthy would be, using a crock pot at night or using my Ninja Combi at night, because it makes it super easy. Why do I do it at night? Because I make my dinner fresh and then I have my leftovers for my lunch the next day. And so then I really just am responsible for preparing one meal a day per se. I have oatmeal and fruit for breakfast. So it kind of makes it easy, or a protein shake. So my breakfast and snacks are pretty easy because they're pretty much just grab and go. Whereas let's say my larger meals, like my dinner or my lunch, they require more preparation. So I'm really going to have to create that structure that makes it easy for me. Now that works for me. I know, because I've tested out many different practices. Some people love to create a structure where every Sunday they grocery shop, they meal prep for the entire week. Love them. They're doing great. That is not my structure. I've tried it. It doesn't work. By Wednesday, I'm throwing the food out and I'm throwing the food out and I'm ordering out, because I learned about myself, and my authentic needs are that I need to be able to change things up. I need to be able to have creativity. I need to be able to change flavors if I need to, et cetera, et cetera. So I know that my dinner meal is really probably one of my more important meals, simply because I also eat with my husband. And so I need to be prepared for him, and he eats a lot. So, there's all kinds of things that happen, right? And so then we execute consistently. So I'm going to follow a daily practice of this, where I'm going to make an effort. I'm going to prioritize it in my mind. A lot of times people will, they have a good idea but then they don't prioritize themselves. They don't prioritize what needs to be done. They know, oh, this needs to be accomplished, this needs to be done, but they don't put it in the top of their mind and make sure that this is something that they want to execute upon or they want to complete upon. And there could be all sorts of reasons why people don't want to look at certain things. Again, we talked about avoidance, we talked about procrastination. That is a strategy that people use in order to avoid accountability and avoid discipline and avoid execution. And so that's where we have to unpack where that avoidance is coming from, where that procrastination is coming from. And hopefully after this class, you'll have some good ideas about that. All right. So I know you can like barely see these slides. Let me see if I can blow this up a little bit. All right. So what is accountability? Accountability really keeps you connected to your intention. And so whatever intention you've made, whether it's eat healthy or have a healthy relationship or build your career or whatever that intention may be, accountability is going to keep you there, because most of the things that you're building, whether it's a relationship, whether it's your health, whether it's your financial goals, require more effort than just 1 or 2 days. They require consistent, deliberate action over an extended period of time. In order to have consistent, deliberate action over an extended period of time, guess what? I need to have accountability to myself. And so this connects us to our intention. But it also offers support when we have that execution strategy that provides more support for us rather than shame. So I have a structure that I'm executing upon, whatever that structure is. In the case of my food, it's preparing dinner and making more dinner so I can have lunch for the next day. And so that is my support. So I know, okay, if I miss dinner, right, let's say I'm out or doing something, then I know, okay, I'm going to pick up dinner so that I keep that going. I'm not going to stop and go, oh my gosh, I'm not home, I didn't eat dinner, all this stuff. I'm not going to get into these conversations around shame and beating myself up. If I do, I know that that's where I need to do some more work on self-awareness and emotional regulation. I need to really unpack what is driving those emotions, because clearly those emotions are being driven by something, some experience, perception, belief, or even core belief from the past that needs to come up and be dealt with and processed properly so that that's no longer on the table. And all of these things really are rooted in your subconscious mind. So remember, your subconscious mind develops between 0 and 8 years old and is based off of your perception of your experiences, what you think about those experiences, your beliefs about those experiences, your core beliefs about those experiences. Those are about yourself. And then your defense mechanisms will defend you in keeping those same strategies. And so those are survival coping strategies. Again, like I said in the beginning, our survival coping strategies are only going to get us so far, especially if you're looking to expand past where your family was, or you're trying to overcome intergenerational trauma, or you're just trying to live a better life than the last generation. Then you're going to need to look at accountability in a different way. We're going to also practice more reflection over perfectionism. This was a really hard thing for me because I was very much conditioned to have to be perfect, have to do it well, and there was no allowing of humanity, and there was a lot of shame around humanity, and a lack of accountability on top of that. So it's an interesting triangle. But I really get to reflect over my values, the values that I have for myself, the values that I set for each other. And as I set these boundaries, both for myself and for other people, now I begin to reflect on what works, what doesn't work, what helps, what doesn't help, etc. Again, not from a shame perspective, but really a self-reflection and going, okay, do I need to put this much pressure on myself? Do I need to keep kicking my own ass pretty much to get ahead. Most of the time it's no. Hey, Miss Piggy, good to see you. Right. Exactly. We very much call ourselves out every single day when we are holding ourselves accountable. Now, again, we talk about internal and external accountability. So we want to learn how to do these things for ourselves. We want to learn how to hold ourselves accountable, but many people are still relying on external accountability sources. Now, I'm going to say something a little radical. I don't trust people. I don't trust any person. I don't care who they are. And the reason being is because humans are fallible. Humans are not consistent and deliberate beings. Humans make mistakes. Humans can go unconscious and conscious. And so I'm not going to put my power in the hand of another fallible human being who now all of a sudden, if they do or they don't do, now my whole ecosystem is affected. Instead, I'm going to hold myself internally accountable, which really just means I'm connected more to my purpose, which means I've got to get out of the head trash and the health of the noise within my mind that is talking to me at all times to hold me back, to frustrate me, etc. Hey, Marlon, good to see you. So I want to find this balance between motivation, my internal motivation, as well as any external motivation. And then also too, we want to, again, reaffirm what's healthy versus what's toxic. So I'm not going to kick my own ass and beat myself up and force myself to do all the things. Instead, I'm going to, be loving and be kind and be supportive. And I'm going to reflect on what I'm doing or what I'm not doing to be able to ensure that I'm moving forward. All right, so now let's go to the next slide. Okay, so now we're going to look at the role of disappointment. So a lot of times I know in my career, so I've had a very long, lustrous career, and I have strived for things in my career or even in my life in general, but I'll frame it in my career right now. And so I have strived for things, right, that have not come true. And so then what happens is, you've been working, you've been diligent, you've been focused, you've been all these things, and then boom, right, it doesn't go the way that's planned. And so then typically that's going to elicit a feeling of disappointment, right? Disappointment can be a really difficult emotion to overcome. And I don't think as many people give enough credence to disappointment. I know for me, disappointment was such a huge battle because I had so much that had gone wrong in my world and in my life that I just needed some hope, right? And this hope couldn't always have to come from me regenerating myself, right? So if I didn't have external hope, right, and then there's no internal hope, then what's going to happen, right? Then all sorts of depression or sadness or even worse develops. And so we want to look at disappointment again as feedback, and it's not a failure. So in the beginning, I would assign disappointment, or as I was accomplishing something and it didn't work out as well and there was a breakdown in it, I would assign it more to my personal character, right? Oh, I didn't make this show, or I didn't get this right, or I didn't make this happen. And so it wasn't that this particular execution was a failure. It was that I was a failure. So we have to separate out what is and what isn't. And so personalizing things and saying, this is who I am and this is who I be, that's where we get into a really slippery slope. And so what we want to reframe disappointment around is more of feedback, right? That, maybe some things you're on the right track, but other things that you're not on the right track. And so perhaps reframing out. And so accountability actually helps you to process your disappointment because you get to refocus in, right? And I can't tell you how many times I would refocus in on my business. Okay, so I didn't hit this revenue goal, or I didn't hit this, patient load, or I didn't hit this accomplishment, right? So let me regroup back to what it is that I want to create, whatever my vision is, which is to bring holistic medicine to the world. And so I bring myself back to that and say, okay, what's left and what do I need to sort through, and how can I overcome these, right? And so it was a lot of recalibration consistently, over the years of my business. My business went through lots of evolution. I started off as a brick and mortar practice in Virginia, and I went through a lot of resistance, a lot of external mess, I would call it, a lot of, fear, whether it was the Bible thumpers who were afraid, or it was major medical that was afraid, or it was the racists that were afraid, or it was the misogynists that were afraid. There was a lot of people's external fear that then was projected onto me, which then made it a lot more difficult for me to accomplish the things that I was going to accomplish. Now, one could say, oh my gosh, poor me, that's horrible, right? And I can go into that victim consciousness if I wanted to. But in the spirit of moving forward, I reflect and I go, okay, what do I need to do back for my own authentic needs? So for me, it was leaving the country, meaning I had to travel first. I needed to get out. I needed to be in places where people didn't know me. They didn't recognize me. They didn't walk up to me. They didn't want to ask me a question about their health. I needed also to get out of the United States and get out of this consciousness of, hey, Mad King, this consciousness of American nationalism. And I needed to explore other cultures and other people and other ideas, and just exposing myself to so many different things. And as I began to do that, right, I began to get even more clear about what I wanted. And then recognition came up. Then it was like, oh, the reason that I'm not gaining the traction that I need to in Virginia is because I'm a global brand. I'm not a regional brand. I'm not just recluse to Virginia Beach or Virginia. Hey, happy Saturday. Good to see you, Ocean Summers. I'm even not just on the national level, because even when I did work on the national level, there was a lot of resistance that I would get. And so I could take that resistance and go, oh, okay, well, I'm going to take my toys and go to a new sandbox. But instead I go, no, you know what? I think this is happening simply because I have bigger vision, bigger purpose that's far beyond these walls that we're in. So really looking back at myself and using those experiences as information and as data for me to now recommit myself to my path, right? Recognizing, okay, my work isn't just in Virginia Beach. It's not just in Virginia. It's not in the United States. It is a global place. And so what do I need to do in order to do that? So having to break free. Now, am I going to tell you that any of this is easy? No. Am I going to tell you that any of this is fun? No. Am I going to tell you that it doesn't take a lot of courage and bravery? Absolutely. Like you absolutely have to hold yourself to a level of purpose and accountability. Hey, bucket of tears, that make sure that you are in alignment, because it's going to require more than what you think, unfortunately. So at least if you're dreaming big, right? If you're dreaming small, I guess it doesn't matter. But if you decide and you choose to dream big, then just know that there's going to be heavy resistance coming back to you. And also, thank you for the heartbeat. And also to recognize that you coming back to your truth and coming back to your self-compassion and your accountability is going to be just that much greater. So how do we overcome the resistance? Hold on one second. All right, how do we overcome the resistance? So first thing is we have to identify what the resistance is. Is the resistance internal or is it external? And toxic positivity won't get you there. I know a lot of people like to use toxic positivity, oh, it's okay, you just woke up today. Well, that's not enough when you're dealing with a lot of complicated things and complicated people. And so for me, it was really getting honest with myself and going, yeah, this sucks, right? I don't like this. I don't want this. What's new and what's different, and then looking to see what is available. And I noticed the thoughts and the feelings that were blocking my progress, the consistent ones: feeling like a failure, feeling let down, feeling overburdened, feeling stressed out, feeling weighed down. Especially, I was a doctor. I stayed open through, I'm still a doctor, but I stayed open through COVID, right? And so what I learned through there is the dependency, the codependency that my patients had on me. I had patients that literally could not make decisions unless I was telling them what to make. And so that was too much for me. Like, I don't want to be that responsible for somebody's life where I'm literally in real time making decisions for them. That's not going to work, right? And so I had to understand that that's a trigger for me of being overburdened. That is a very familiar place of having to take on ownership and responsibility, making sure everyone else's needs are met, making sure everyone else is more perfect, or more cared for than myself, depriving myself, depriving my own needs, depriving my own wants, right? That came out of more of a unworthiness wound, but also to exploitation wounds as well, and not being seen and not being heard. And so we normalize certain behaviors. So until we start to change, until we start to do something different, we're not going to come up against the resistance. And so the resistance helps us to understand what our thoughts and what our feelings are about a particular situation. It also allows us the opportunity to recognize what our triggers are. We can't heal what was wounded in relationships by ourselves, unfortunately. So we do have to have relationship in order to mirror our own triggers and see what it is that we need to work on and what it is we need to look at still. And as we look at these situations or emotions or different things that pop up, we're going to practice compassion. And as we practice compassion, that's when we're going to reframe this, right? So everything is in perfect order, regardless of appearances. Everything is working out for me. Everything is working out for me. There are so many affirmations. I can take that limiting thought and belief, like I'm a failure, I'm too much, I don't have whatever, to, okay, I recognize that I'm triggered. This is resistance. What is it that I'm going to reframe this into? Okay, I just need to say, right, for myself every single day, everything is in perfect order, regardless of appearances, whether I believe this or not. Everything is working out for me. Everything is working out for me, because I need to now really hold myself to a higher state, a higher frequency, a higher mind. And that is not creating any stories around what happened, what didn't happen, who I was. So sometimes you have to process out those emotional triggers and really get clear before you re-establish yourself back to your purpose. And as you're reframing these resistance opportunities into insight and growth, you develop more clarity. And what happens is more inspired action happens. So also too, if you are used to and conditioned to things being hard, things being difficult, things being challenging, recognize that that is a belief, a false belief that has to be shifted. And so again, that would be something that you could shift quite easily. Like, everything is fun and easy if I choose, right? Everything is fun and easy if I choose. And so making sure that everything doesn't become this long, arduous, windy road sort of event. There are there you do have access to being able to make things a little bit easier than they were in the past. And so that is a conscious choice. So often people go unconscious and then they just are resigned. They just go, oh, it's always been a certain way, so it's always going to be a certain way, so I'm going to stay in this certain way, instead of acknowledging the disappointment, the frustration, the anger, the hurt, whatever it is that we're feeling, processing through that. And then after we process through all of that and release those negative emotions, now there's space, now there's energy for self-compassion, for ease, for fun, for grace, for whatever it is that we want to create. But we do have to acknowledge those more darker emotions. And that's why shadow work and shadow integration is so key. It's not making everything look beautiful, making everything perfect, making everything happy. It's also really getting brutally honest with yourself in what it is that you're looking at to achieve. Again, whether it's financial, that may be your spending habits, that may be your generation of money, that may be intergenerational impacts of money, that could be all kinds of things. In relationship, it could be your familiar relationships, your relationships with your parents, your relationships with other people in the past that you haven't processed with. If you've broken up with people and haven't processed those relationships, a lot of times those unhealed wounds will show up in new relationships. And so needing to process that. When it comes to your health, really processing what other doctors have done, what other doctors have told you, how other professionals have handled you, having to process through all of those and acknowledge that hurt, because you can't take those woundings in with you when you're trying to heal. So often I'll hear these stories with patients all the time. Oh, this doctor told me this and this doctor told me that. And so now they're even more on guard and they're even more resistant to healing, simply because they're more resigned into what has occurred to them in the past. And so having to let go of those false ideals, those false beliefs, wherever you pick them up for and however you pick them up, can really help you to make those small changes. And again, it's little small changes. It's 1%. So if you can do 1% better than you did yesterday, you're in good shape. That 1%. So it's not these big, pendulum swings in different directions. Instead, it's these very gradual movements across time. All right, so now we're going to look at your archetypes. So I'm trained in applied Jungian theory. So applied Jungian theory comes from the work of Carl Jung, even though he was racist AF. Hey, angry veteran, glad to see you join the live. Thank you. And so even though he was a racist AF, he did make some good points. And so he talks a lot about the shadow and talks about the subconscious mind. And he termed them as archetypes. So one of the structures that we learned in applied Jungian was about our archetypes, right? So these are kind of imaginary people, if you will, which is a little bit different than a complex, but these are imaginary people that we kind of pull in that help shape our discipline patterns. These are imaginary fictional entities within our mind, body, and spirit that we pull onto, and you may recognize some of them. So let's go over them. All right, the overachiever, right? So that one is driven, but burnout all the time, right? Welcome to my life. The avoider, they're sensitive, but overwhelmed. The perfectionist, they have high standards, but very low grace, so don't piss them off. The rebel, they crave freedom and they resist structure, so they fight structure. So that structures for fulfillment boy was really tough for me to get. I was fighting. I did not want structure. The pleaser, who puts others before selves, or people pleasers all over. The resigned one, they have low trust but also low motivation as well. Nothing's ever going to work out. This isn't going to get any better, blah, 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 right? Typically very negative, like a naysayer. And then the judge, right? The judge, a lot of people have the judge, so we'll look at the judge a little bit deeper. But this is a critical, harsh, shame-based judge. Now, all of these people, right, these are all caricatures in your board of directors in your mind, right? So imagine that you are the CEO of your own company, right? However, you have a board of directors. So you have your primitive as one board member, you have your subconscious as another board member, you have your conscious mind as another board member, but you also have all of these other entities as board members as well. So the overachiever, right, is who accomplished my 7 degrees in my field, right? Driven, 40,000 patients, 20 years of blah, 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 right? All those things, right? That was the overachiever who was constantly seeking approval and validation through external means, right? Because like I said, I didn't get hugged enough as a child. And so because of that, the overachiever really picked up and said, you congratulate us when we get an A. I'm just going to keep getting A's. And then away we go. The avoider. So the avoider is somebody who's very sensitive but overwhelmed. This would honestly happen for me in relationships, because I would be really sensitive to the things that they were saying and the things that they were doing. And oftentimes when I hold other people accountable, when I say, hey, you're doing this, this is how this makes me feel, it's live at the gaslight, meaning that we get gaslit into, oh no, it's not that, it's not this, oh Erica, oh this, oh that, right? And so a lot of times then you just become overwhelmed, so you just avoid it altogether because you just know that people are not going to acknowledge it, right? The perfectionist. So this is somebody, again, who is constantly driven, who wants to get things perfect, who wants to get things right, who wants to get these well, but they kick their own ass in the process. I know I did this with exercise so much. It was like, okay, another plate, another this, another hot yoga class, another power yoga class, another hot power yoga class with weight, it was just crazy town. And so this was that perfectionist that was constantly putting higher and higher standards on myself with absolutely, if I missed a day, oh my God, that was like the worst thing ever. Right. And then the rebel, I think the rebel's been with me pretty much the whole time. And so she loves to be free. Like, who doesn't want to be free? She wants to be free. So when I had to really work on creating structures for fulfillment to be able to execute, she no likey. She was like, no, I don't want to do this. I don't, so I had to train myself and in turn train her to go along with the structure. So there is a lot of interplay that happens when we have these archetypes. And then the pleasers, right? So the pleasers, I got rid of this a while ago, but the pleasers often will self-abandon and then constantly go to self. So in the dynamic of my marriage, if I do that with where I'm trying to please him and I'm not trying to please myself, it always goes south. Simply because most of the time my husband doesn't even know what he wants. And so if I'm leaving my own needs to cater to him and he doesn't even know what he wants half the time, it's going to be disaster. We're going to go off the cliff together. And so he really taught me how to stay within my own self and stay really with my own continuity in order for me to express what I want, what I need, what I can do, what I can't do. The resigned one, I think this was definitely after I left my private practice. After 15 years, I was very resigned with just how I had been treated and how things had gone and, all of that. And so low trust, low motivation, I took a year off and just needed to just recapitulate. And then the judge is less with me, but the judge is somebody that shows up for most people. The judge literally judges you at every given moment. Oh, why did you do this? Why did you do that? Why didn't you do that? Why did you do this? Why did you do that? So these are all part of your board of directors. And so your board of directors in your mind. And so it gets a little full up there because you're allegedly the CEO. Then you have your primitive mind, which regulates your nervous system, your subconscious mind, which regulates all your memories. And then you have your conscious mind, which regulates your decision making. And then you have these archetypes, which these archetypes are just defense mechanisms. That's all they are. They are there to defend you against certain things external, but also things internal. And so these are strategies that a lot of people choose in order to survive life. But when we're learning to thrive in life and not survive in life, we let go of these archetypes because we know we don't need to defend ourselves anymore. We can be free. We can create structures. We can build dreams. We can hold ourselves accountable. But it does take some work because most people don't even realize they have these archetypes running around, and then they don't know when they employ them. So that's where that self-awareness comes in to go, okay, and when I work with people one-on-one, I will often point out, oh, there's your judge. Oh, there's your rebel. Oh, there's your avoider. There's your overachiever. There's your perfectionist, etc. Because you need to mirror that back in order to see. Because again, we think all the voices in our head are our voice, and it's not, right? So sometimes we have the voices of our mothers, our fathers, our family, our, teachers, our society. We have all these voices in our head. And then those voices are being defended with all of these archetypes. And so we have to sift and sort through all of this to really get back to our core authentic needs in terms of what we really want. When I went through lots of deconstruction, but I went through leadership training. That was one of the things that we did initially, was separating out the all the voices in your head to back to just one calm voice. And I'll remember we did this whole weekend seminar where, you're pretty much just glued to your seat for the entire weekend. And there's a teacher in the front, and they go through, the lessons, and, they'll do, a lesson, and then they'll do a breakout where you pair and share, where you guys pair against each other and you kind of talk and, process things. And then there's journaling, and then there's homework on the breaks, and, you're calling different people, you're getting things accountable, you're getting things cleared up, all these things. Right. And I remember that, we went through this Friday long days, from like 9 to 10, crazy, with like 2 breaks and a lunch. And then we went to our Saturday class, which was kind of similar. And then we had our Sunday short class. And I remember coming out of my Sunday short class when I finally got to this place of recognizing that I was the driver of all of this, and that I had all these, different people in my brain. And it was back down to just that one solid voice. I remember going at a parking garage to get my car, and it was so quiet. It was like the quietest I think it had ever been, because I didn't have all that chatter going up. It was just so super quiet, super content. And I remember just bursting out laughing, because I had never heard that much stillness, because again, we have this whole board of directors that's up there that we don't even know about. Okay, so let's dive in for this last part of the class. We're going to dive into each individual archetype so you can assess kind of who's who and what's what in your board of directors. So the overachiever is driven, but they're always risking burnout, because they're always pushing themselves to meet this standard, but they ignore balance, they ignore rest, they ignore themselves most of the time. And it's mired in a lot of perfectionism and productivity. I need to perform, I need to be perfect in my performance. And so they strive for flawless results, but then they get super overwhelmed with the pressure, because none of us are perfect. And so they benefit naturally from supportive accountability. So encouragement that nurtures self-care and sustainable effort. So if you are an overachiever, you want to consciously be telling yourself, when you complete a task, you did a good job. You're not going to want to do that. It's going to feel very foreign to do that. It's going to feel really kind of just unhealthy to do that. I don't, I shouldn't do that, whatever. But learning to say, I'm proud of you, Erica, or learning to say, you're doing a good job, Erica, or you're, on your way, or something that is positive to acknowledge, I'm still adjusting back to the heat again, to acknowledging what you've been doing, and then in turn moving you the next way. So the avoider, right? Again, the avoider is sensitive and overwhelmed. So the avoider, hey, Chili, the avoider tends to be really sensitive in spirit, but then they tend to get overwhelmed. And so they often will not look at different emotional challenges. They'll avoid those because they don't want to kind of rock the boat. Hey, MBW, they don't want to rock the boat. And so because of that, they're going to delay action or avoid responsibility altogether because they're afraid. And so this is where that inner voice needs gentle encouragement. Again, you're doing well, I can see you, you're supporting. Thank you for the heart me. You're supported, just that very gentle, I know you weren't able to do that today, but let's try it again tomorrow. This is a part of reparenting, and reparenting your inner child, especially if your inner child did not receive this type of encouragement. So remember, defense mechanisms happen in 0 to 8 years old based off of your experiences, perceptions, beliefs. Hey, Melanin, and then core beliefs, and then you defend those. And so when you're defending them, you're using an archetype. So this communication is actually reparenting to that inner child. Thank you for the heart me, because she needs, or he needs, that gentle encouragement, because they never got it. Instead, they were, they maybe had an explosive parent, which is why they're overwhelmed, and they tend to tiptoe around other people. So what you've experienced has a direct response on who you be and how you operate in life. So perfectionism, this is a common one. So if you're a perfectionist, if you have an archetype of perfectionism, then you're going to have high standards. So it's got to be flawlessly executed. It's got to be awesome to the point. Hey, gosh, I can never pronounce your name. You know who I'm talking to. And then 8 Black, good to see you back. And so you have those high standards, you looking for those flawless results. And then you often don't recognize your progress because you're always looking at what can I do better? What can I improve more? And so you don't have a lot of grace with yourself. And in fact, you tend to be a little bit more judgmental. And so this is where in your reparenting, you need balanced expectations. And so expecting less from yourself is healthier in these situations. And then when you do accomplish even the smallest of things, lots of encouragement, lots of support, lots of, oh my God, you're doing a great job. That's part of that reparenting process of perfectionism. If you are a rebel like me, you're in good company. Let's burn it all down together. And so, if you are a rebel, you're going to really resist rules and structure, and you're going to seek autonomy above all else. Okay, all these systems and structures are fine, but I'm going to do it my way and I'm going to figure it out, right? I'm going to figure it out the way I want to figure it out. And so, again, this rebel archetype is going to push boundaries in order to reclaim independence. And so, I had 2 authoritarian parents. They were both Marines. And so guess what happened, right? So there was this rebel archetype that really developed because I could not sustain in those unrealistic structures. And so I really had to create a life that worked for me. That was really where my reparenting is coming up with something that worked for me. That meant, okay, I'm not going to, just go to school and do this traditional thing because that's what we're taught to do. I'm going to do something in school that I love, right? So I still maintain that structure of, oh, you got to go to school, Erica, but making sure that I do it on my own terms, right? Or even, oh, I'm going to, move, I'm going to live a certain place, right? But I'm not going to live in the United States, right? And that offended some people in my family, but it was like, I needed to personalize this to myself, right? Or even, I want to marry somebody and that person may not fit all of these different stipulations on these papers that, make it okay for you, but that's fine because guess what? This is well sorted and well suited for me and what I need. So it's personalizing it. It's really detaching from those external reality makers, whoever they are, right? They can be friends, family, they can be parental figures, they can be colleagues, they can be all kinds of things external, but it's really about you personalizing it and creating a life that you love and creating your own vision. The pleaser archetype is very self-sacrificing. If you're a mother, if you're a wife, a lot of times we slip into these roles very easily. If you are a Black woman, especially, we have been literally indoctrinated into and conditioned to be the pleaser, to always self-abandon and give and give and give and give and give with no recognition for that. And so you often seek approval to avoid conflict or even disapproval. But this particular archetype, eventually giving and giving and giving will lead to burnout. And so this is where the reparenting is, having healthy boundaries, making sure your yeses are your yeses and your nos are your nos. Because if you're not clear about what you can and cannot do, you're going to be operating in these pleaser mode. And unfortunately, it's going to thrive in imbalance. The pleaser loves to please other people. And so the pleaser has to be reminded, wait a second, we have to protect our inner child here. We need to talk to her or him, and we need to love on her and him. And so because of that, we can't necessarily do that. So I'd often, my people pleasers, oftentimes when they would come in, I would have them literally just start saying no. It doesn't matter what it is, even if they could do it, just start saying no and learning what happens when you say no, learning the reactions of other people when you say no. Because if you've always been a yes person and all of a sudden you start saying no, you get to see real quick who's for you and who's not for you. And then if you're overly sensitive, or if you are sensitive, not overly, but if you're super sensitive and you're overwhelmed and you have more of that avoidance archetype, then what's going to happen is you say, hey, I don't want to do this. And they say, wait a second, they're going to react and explode. And then you get overwhelmed and shut down, and then avoid altogether. So the archetypes also will interplay with each other as well. Just to remember, think about your archetypes as your defense mechanisms. That's really all they are. And then we have the resigned one. So the resigned one, they just doubt everyone. And this typically happens once you've been burned a lot. You tend to be more in the resigned, where you just don't trust anybody. You doubt other people's intentions, but you also feel very isolated at best. So even though you doubt everyone else because of good reason, right? You've also isolated yourself out, where you no longer have any of your friendships anymore, or any of your relationships. So there is a need for reconnection, but there's also a need to reflect on who should have that red rope access to you. So I have a very close inner circle. Then I have, lots and lots and lots of acquaintances, because everybody thinks they're my friend. And so I make sure that I decide who gets to be in that inner circle, because otherwise other people, like energy vampires, will just feed off of you. And so then you'll struggle to find energy and find purpose, as you are, pretty much a hookup station to all of the other people that are around you. The last one that we'll look at, which is really common, and why I wanted to kind of look deeper at this one, is the judge. So the judge is an archetype that most people will have, right? The judge is very critical, will show up at any time and judge everything that you do, you say, etc. So when we break this down, so a belief, right? So any of these archetypes, we can use this structure. So we first start off with the belief that keeps showing up, because remember, in the subconscious mind, you have experiences, perceptions of those experiences, beliefs, core beliefs, and then you defend those. Remember, your archetypes are your defense mechanisms. And so we look at the belief to really unpack and shift this archetype. So the belief for the judge archetype is, if I'm hard on myself, then I'll improve. So there's this idea that if I kick my own ass, that all of a sudden I will be greater, do better, etc. But that's a fundamental misconception of the judge. The judge is operating just off of insanity, really. And so the common behaviors of the judge is going to be self-criticism, guilt, because that's how the judge manifests in your daily life. So the judge is going to be very harsh to criticize you. Sometimes I've even said to patients, I go, if you had a friend that spoke to you the way you speak to yourself, would you keep them as a friend? And they're like, oh God, no. And so we want to be mindful with the judge, how you're speaking to yourself. Are you judging yourself? Are you criticizing yourself? Are you beating yourself up? A really good reframe on this, so replacing the inner judge with that inner guide. So moving from criticism to wisdom. One thing that really shifted it for me is when I learned that I'm doing the very best with what I have at the time. And initially that's like, yeah, I get it. But then when you go deeper, is nobody goes out and says, you know what, I want to really screw this thing up. You know what, this relationship, I really want to tank it. This financial goal, I want to make sure I don't achieve it. This, business idea, I really want to just bankrupt it. Most people don't go into things with those ideas, right? And if they do, they're hidden in the shadow, right? They're not able to be seen. They're unconscious. And so as we begin to strive and begin to do things and begin to change our mind and change our world, that's when these unconscious things start to show up, right? And that's where we, instead of using that as a way to bludgeon ourselves, we use that as part of our discipline, as part of our accountability, as part of our reconnection back to our intention, back to our purpose, back to our structure, back to our execution. And so this is going to take some practice. This is not a, oh my God, I listened to one live. Yay, good. Yeah, I was listened to one live and all of a sudden I figured it all out. No, not at all. This actually is going to take some time and take some practice as you're beginning to really confront and come to terms with your archetypes and how they're going. And so the judge, again, we're going to shift from punishment, criticism, beating yourself up to, okay, everything is in perfect order regardless of appearances. I'm doing everything possible that I can. If I'm not, what's left on the table? Many times I'd have to like literally write out what I was doing, what I was not doing, etc., just to get the judge in check. The judge will show up unconsciously. We don't even have to really think about these archetypes. They just show up. Why? Because they're defense mechanisms. They're trying to protect us against all those really deep emotional woundings that we have not processed through quite yet. All right, so some rebuilding on our discipline. So really it's about resetting the nervous system, because the primitive mind, which regulates your nervous system, really goes into fear or love. And so anytime that you feel afraid, just know it's because the nervous system is detecting something bigger or greater than self, right? But if we reframe that out and we go, wait a second, how can this be bigger and greater than self when I am the master creator of my world? Hey, Rebel, if I'm the master creator of my world, I'm creating these things. So how can I bring myself back? Through my breath, right? So maybe I'll do, some different breath work exercises. Maybe I'll do some box breathing. Maybe I'll do a vagal nerve reset. Maybe I'll do some Kundalini yoga. And so I need to reset my nervous system just so I'm back to neutral. So I'm no longer afraid. I'm no longer in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode. So remember, when we're triggered with fear, we go into fight mode where we're fighting the world and ourselves. We go into flight mode where we're avoiding everyone in the world and ourselves. We go into freeze mode where we go, oh my God, I can't do anything. I'm just going to stop and freeze. And then fawn, we self-abandon, and then we go and try to fix other people. And so those are, again, are expressions of fear. Remember, primitively, there's only two motivations: love or fear. So if I'm choosing fear, right, I'm choosing some of those behaviors. And if you choose those behaviors, that's fine, but just be aware that those are the behaviors that you're choosing, right? And so that's where the work has to happen. So when we take a step back and we begin to look at ourselves from a more loving perspective, a more whole perspective, we're not looking at ourselves from a place of judgment. We're not looking at ourselves from a place of perfectionism or overachieving or fear or any of those things. Instead, we're looking at our place from love. Our daily practices include our journaling, our reflection, our tracking, because we want to build more awareness to ourselves and our nervous system, right? And so those daily practices help. Now, you may fall off or fall on those daily practices all the time. I know I fall off and fall on all the time, and that's fine. Some days you just need sleep. Some days you may not need to work out. Some days you may not need to eat healthy. I know when anybody's going through a big transition in their life, whether they're getting married, divorced, or somebody unalived, or they're moving or something like that, it's pretty much you only have a certain bandwidth. You got to throw something out. Usually the food gets thrown out, right? But that's a temporary solution until you get some of the other things in your life worked out. So definitely working on that. Mirror work is pretty powerful. It's something that I have to really be consistent with, which is really just looking at yourself in the mirror and saying what is so. So for right now with my business, that's kind of what I've been avoiding. And I watch myself avoid. So it's not just that I've already put the intention in place. I don't have a structure, which is probably why I'm avoiding it. But even if I did have a structure, the practice is not there. So I need to create a structure and a fulfillment where I can do this work consistently, right? Then there's mantras, right? So we can say affirmations. Everything is working out for me. Everything is working out for me. Everything is in perfect order, regardless of appearances, whether I believe this or not. Hey, Kuma, all of these different mantras help us to be uplifted, especially in the moment. And then as we talked about these reparenting, so these archetypes that we've gone over are all just defense mechanisms that are trying to protect our inner child who is wounded. Remember, our inner child develops between 0 and 8 years old. And so that subconscious is telling the conscious mind, which develops between 9 and 12, which also regulates your decision making, your logic, your voice, and your reason. It's giving communication, and it's bringing these archetypes in to defend your position. So if you believe I'm not important, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, whatever those may be, I'm not worthy, guess what? You're going to have an archetype that's going to come into play and going to prevent you from being able to move forward. And so we want to reparent, we want to reframe out that archetype and be able to have our freedom. There should not be once you have broken free from those patternings, there shouldn't be resistance anymore. So the resistance really is just feedback to let you know that something needs to be addressed and something needs to be looked at, and it's not being addressed and not being looked at. But then once you acknowledge and remove the resistance, naturally it becomes easier. And that's why I teach people a holistic lifestyle rather than teaching people a diet or teaching people what supplements to take or whatever. I teach you a lifestyle of this because a lifestyle is going to take you through your entire life. A diet plan or health protocol is only set for a period of time. And usually with health protocols, either you're doing it or you're not. And there's not a lot of room for grace and love and support and any of those things. And so the other thing too is you want to create safe accountability relationships. So that may mean accountability with yourself, but it also mean accountability with other people. And that may take time. Again, like I said, I don't really trust people. So I'm very, very, very mindful about who I share my personal experiences with and what feedback I get. But when I am in kind of a breakdown, if you will, I will ask myself, I'll ask my higher self, okay, who has, the next information for me, or who has wisdom for me? And I'll go through a list of the people that I have in my life. And then I'll say, oh, go talk to this person, go talk to that person, go talk to this person. That way I'm using spirit and I'm using higher self as a guide rather than my own ego and my own humanity. And then the last thing, tools for rebuilding discipline is habit building. And so learning really healthy, you can do habit stacking, you can do habit structures. So there's all kinds of different ways we can talk about habit building, maybe in another class, but we want to create habits that are going to sustain us, because that's really where the discipline lies. And the habits should be easy. They should not be, run 20 miles every day. That shouldn't be that's not really a tangible habit that you can do easily and effortlessly. All right, let me find this last slide. All right, cool. Here's your integration of everything that we went over. So if you found this content helpful, please like, share, subscribe. Also go back to the beginning. It's going to be streamed on YouTube. There's a 2-part discipline class. I did one class the other day and then this part. So feel free to watch both. And so at the end of this, you're going to choose one behavior to shift, whether that's a behavior with your health, a behavior with your money, a behavior with your career, or behavior with your relationships. You're going to choose one behavior that you choose to shift to compassion. And so again, in the beginning, you're going to look at it, right? Honestly, what's your thoughts, what's your feelings, what all your ideas are around them. And then you're going to commit to shifting this to a place of compassion and love. So you're going to observe rather than judge. So if you are judging yourself for the habits, that's not going to work. The judge archetype is already in full effect. Instead, you're going to really hover above yourself to see the truth about yourself, and you're going to operate with compassion. You're going to identify your dominant archetype. So which archetype, which defense mechanism is showing up? Is it the rebel? Is it the judge? Is it the perfectionist? Who's showing up? And then you want to create consistent rituals that are going to help challenge that archetype. So if it's overachiever, right? You're going to challenge, I'm doing the very best I can, regardless of appearances. Every day I'm doing a little bit more. You're going to offer yourself a lot of grace. Maybe you're not going to do the next big assignment. Maybe you're going to take a rest and then maybe pick it up another day. So really check into what create some consistent reflection time. I like to do it at the end of my day, honestly, because then I can journal about how I did for the day and reflect. And again, you're going to offer yourself as a guide, as a humble teacher, not as a judge. We want to shift that inner dialogue. And then you're going to continue to recommit yourself as you fall off, because you're going to fall off a billion times. You're going to commit yourself with love. So if I have made an intention that I'm going to eat healthy and I've gone grocery shopping and everything's good to go, and I just need to meal prep, and maybe I just decided I'm not going to meal prep that day, right? I'm not going to beat myself up for not meal prepping. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, what did I tell myself? What were my thoughts? What were my feelings? How did I come into alignment or misalignment with that? And then I'm going to recommit tomorrow. So I'm going to start dinner again tonight and then start my structure from there. All right. Our final thoughts before I jump off. So, transformation. So, discipline is not about control. It's actually how you show love to your future self, and it's how you connect to your future self. And so, we want to shift from this mindset of punishment to this mindset of care. So, again, discipline is not about punishment, even though we've been framed it as punishment. It's actually an act of self love and self worth and devotion to your intention and to your purpose. We want to also find compassion. So we want to approach discipline from a very gentle place, from a very loving place. Hey, Fit Mom, a very open place. And we want to choose commitments. We want to choose actions that are committed to our practice for our long-term health. So we want to make these things realistic. We want to make them measurable. We want to make them where they're attainable as well. We don't want to come up with some big, crazy structure that we're not going to be able to complete or accomplish. So discipline is very necessary when you are making a change, whether that is a change in your mental health, your emotional health, your physical health, your relationships, your money, your career. It doesn't really matter. All of these areas of your life require discipline. And so if you are struggling or challenged with discipline, which is nothing more than your commitment to your purpose, then you want to look at what archetype is in the way, what one of those board of directors is not on the same page, because clearly you as the CEO are making certain decisions and you're being usurped by one of your committee members. So definitely assess your committee up there, your archetypes. I may also get into some complexes as well. Maybe we'll get into complexes when we're talking about habits, but just so you kind of learn a little bit about archetypes, how we use that as our defense mechanisms, and how reparenting can go a long way. So thank you guys so much for attending. I so appreciate you all. This will be streamed on YouTube, so you can go back and check out the replay if you'd like. We are on break for Intro to Holistic Medicine 1. Intro to Holistic Medicine 1 is all about nutritional assessment. All of that information for Intro to Holistic Medicine 1 is in the course shell. You can link go to the link in the bio and scroll down, fill it out. And this week, passing, it'll be the last week that it'll just be kind of open willy-nilly. Next week, maybe even to the following week, it'll be closed by a paywall. So definitely get in while you can. And if you want a certification in it, or if you want a certificate, there is payment. I think it's $110 if you pay it in full, $117 if you pay it over the course of 3 months, $39. It's a 12-week class talking about nutritional assessment. We're on a 3-week break right now. This is just a bonus class that I'm teaching on discipline and accountability. And in the next couple weeks, we'll be starting an Intro to Holistic Medicine 2, which talks all about detoxification and letting things go. We'll talk a lot more about your emotions and how your emotions are connected to certain organs, and we'll get more into your home as well as your working environment as well, in terms of what needs to be detoxed, because it's not just your physical body. It's not just about taking pills and potions when it comes to detoxification. There's probably a lot of things in your world that needs to be detoxified. So tune in for that as that comes up in the next couple weeks. Naturally, I do also own a media company. So if you are a holistic health company and you need some support in your marketing needs, I am a breath of information indeed. And also too, if you you or your family member needs holistic healthcare, I still do treat patients internationally and through Zoom, so through telehealth. So let us know with all of that, and like, share, subscribe, all the things. It's been great to chat with all of you. And so bye now, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and IG.